Previously on Stillwater Bay. Darkness falls and evil emerges. The waters of Stillwater Bay are rife with malevolent beings, and only the Guild stands in the way. Li Chen received a vision in the morning, a vision of feathers and bone. Jars of blood were prepared, a plan was made. John, Sam, Jonathan and Asadi were to carry it out. Nothing went right. It isn't anyone's fault in particular that everything went wrong tonight, but the fact is, it did all go wrong. And that's why the two of them stumble into the graveyard, barely ahead of the invisible terrors stalking their tracks.
Jonathan Delory cries out as he falls very near Takia's grave. Asadi's Takia. The grave is fresher than most. It certainly won't be the last one they dig before the Guild's mission is all over, one way or the other. The fall and the rush of agony from his already dislocated shoulder turns Jonathan's stomach. Having nothing in his belly except for coffee doesn't help. Sam Karstens isn't the type to drop a friend like this, but they ran the whole way here and chose to make their last-ditch sprint among the graves to survive the monsters. She drops to her knees next to Jonathan and tries to apologize, but simply goes on heaving for breath instead. Her mind is on graves too. She thinks of Deontay Lewis. He should be buried here, but he's not, and that's dangerous. Too many unresolved responsibilities. Too many monsters still on the loose. Jonathan rolls to his back and stares up into the stars and moonlight between the dark boughs of trees and tendrils of Spanish moss. He manages to speak first. Thanks. For what? You know for what. He tries to pull himself up using a lichen-encrusted tombstone, and he groans from a new electric pain in his hand that's almost enough to make him forget his shoulder. Almost. He looks into his palm, and the moonlight shines over the edges of glass smeared and coated in blood. Ironically, it's not even his blood. Those damn jars didn't work at all, Sam. His next self-inflicted torture is pulling glass from his palm. Pained weakness alternates between one arm and the other until he bears down and extracts the glass anyway. It's his jaws that hurts when he relaxes after discarding the last shard. In this lull, Sam regulates her breathing and her heart rate. What happened to John and Asadi? Don't know. It happened so fast. Jonathan tries to shift himself into a seated position, but numb exhaustion through his bones tells him he isn't ready for so bold a move. They were gone by the time I cleared the spots from my eyes after hitting that tree. We have to go look for them. They could be hurt or worse. As if in response, a titter of sound travels through the trees beyond the edge of the graveyard. Could have been the wind. Could have been either laughter or chimes from a distant yard. Whatever it is, it refuses to clarify into anything that can be outright understood. Sam notices the sound, but she is more distracted by the fact that the trees outside the graveyard's boundary sway while there's no wind. She moves toward Jonathan, but he hauls himself up to rest against an ancient marker in a clumsy rush to keep her from touching him. Can you take off that coat so I can look at your shoulder? She asks. No. She tilts her head. Too stubborn, or it hurts too much? Dislocated is all. It's happened before. He makes a face as she takes his wrist and then eases his arm up gently. After a pause, she plants the sole of one shoe against his chest, marking his jacket with grave dirt. The rest of this won't be gentle. I know, Sam. Thank you. For what? He takes a deep breath. You know for what. She jerks his arm back into socket, and his cry echoes out into the trees in all directions. The windless shadows in between answer him with titters of laughter, like chimes. Liang Chen goes to answer the pounding on the back door of the library as quickly as she can. She sensed something was wrong a while before this racket started, but didn't want to worry Susie, who walks up behind Lee as she opens the door. John Walters staggers in with Asadi right behind him. Asadi takes the door from Lee and slams in closed. "What happened?" Susie asks. John tries to hold the wall, but then collapses into the nearest chair with his eyes squeezed shut. "John," Lee starts to ask a question he doesn't want to answer. "Are you—" Asadi saves him by interrupting. "It didn't work." Lee turns her attention off John, and he's grateful as he tries to compose himself. "What didn't work? You didn't capture them? You didn't get them buried?" "Where are Jonathan and Sam?" Susie walks toward the others with her hands up near her face. "We got separated," Asadi says. "I don't know. There was an explosion, and then they had us, but we couldn't really see them. They weren't Pelongs. Wrong monster." John leans forward and opens and squeezes closed his fists over and over as he speaks. "What did they look like?" Lee asks. "When we could see them," Asadi turns from Susie to Lee, "they were just like you said. Fiery birds, misshapen, and rib bones showing through their flesh and feathers." "But the trap didn't work?" Susie asks. Asadi shakes his head. "We coated the inside of the jars with the blood. It looked like we'd lured them inside. We closed them and started to bury them, but they exploded out and attacked us." "Was the trap just not strong enough?" Susie asks. "Strong enough for Pelongs," Lee said, "if you did everything exactly as you just told me." "Because they weren't Pelongs." John stands on watery legs with his hands shaking. "They behaved like them until they had us all together. They set the trap for us, not the other way around." "What were they like after they escaped?" Lee asks. "What was their true form?" "Still invisible," Asadi says, and holds his hands up in the air. "Still shapeshifting, just like they should have been." "What was different about them after the ambush?" Lee presses. "Silvery light. Not white, but silver," John says. "And the shapes of giant men, flashes of legs, arms, and chests, but not all at once. Always outlined in silvery light, but never completely solid. Long faces, twisted. And they were laughing as they attacked us," Asadi adds. "Oh my God," Susie says through her fingers and shakes her head. "We have to find Sam and Jonathan. We can't lose any more." Lee turns, and to Asadi it appears like she's adjusting the thermostat, but she opens the wall instead. "Come on." It took Asadi a few seconds to process the fact that there was a secret passage. He supposed it wasn't the strangest thing he had seen tonight. The others follow Lee into the lower levels. "Did the town pay for these additions to the library?" Asadi asks. "Private funding," Susie says behind him. A string of bulbs wired to the ceiling hangs above them. They provide dim light to the multiple chambers below the library. Part of Asadi's mind can tell there is an order and symmetry to the rooms. Somehow he knows there are other passages and possibly more levels below this one. The rest of his brain feels lost in dream logic, like this all has to be a nightmare that began with the violent death of his wife and unborn child. He's given up hope on ever waking up from this, though. He finds himself in a sort of central room with a large wooden table, like one you'd find at a board meeting. Asadi fails to take in all the details of the path through the chambers that led him here. As Lee rifles through items on the other side of a doorway, she says, "I'll give you a full tour when we have more time, Asadi. I promise." He recalls her telling him that the evil connected to the water had something to do with that resort in town as well, and had promised to explain that later too. He's losing track of everything that needs to be explained later. She gathers books from trunks and nooks and scatters them on the table. She flips through them without showing much concern for their age. Invisible and shapeshifting are always tough to pin down. I didn't feel right about Pelongs even though the details matched. They typically have human masters commanding them. The bloody jars would have worked because that's part of their origin. Anything else you can tell me? As Lee continues to search through the texts without looking up, John and Asadi meet eyes. Asadi looks away and says, "There was a sound, separate from the laughing, but maybe part of it." "Describe it," Lee demands. Asadi looks to John, and the older man says, "It was like tiny bells or chimes in the distance." "Maybe like shimmering cloth rubbing together too," Asadi adds. "I don't know. One of them spoke to John, I think. What did it say?" "Nothing, Asadi," John said. "Just the bell sound." Asadi stares at John and is about to say something, but doesn't get the chance. "They're Maziqim." Lee slaps her hand down on a page in one of the books. "Ancient, rare, dangerous, but not unstoppable." "What do we need to do?" John leans over the page and realizes the runes on the page are ones he doesn't recognize. "Gossamer thread," Lee begins, "formed into a web, laced with silvery charms and lures that catch and reflect the moonlight. They cannot resist. Once they are dazzled and show their true form, you wrap a single strand of the thread behind them to trap them in. As you pull the trap tighter, they will destroy themselves back into moonlight, surrendering their place in our world rather than be contained." She looks up from her reading as if that is the end of it. Asadi shakes his head. "That sounds like Middle-earth fan fiction. What does it even mean? Do you have magic spiders? Do they sell gossamer thread at the craft store over in Peach Blossom?" John paces the room. "Fishing line, maybe?" "Maybe," Lee says. "That could work." "Do you have fishing line?" Asadi asks. "It's old and didn't store it well," John says. "Probably brittle and not enough for a web." "What about charms?" Asadi turns to look at each person in the room. "Fishing lures might work," Susie says. John takes a deep breath and looks up at the ceiling. "We could use reflective metal lures and weights to weave onto the fishing line. Again, I don't have any like that." Asadi snaps his fingers a couple of times. "There's a bait and tackle shop in town, right? It's probably closed at this hour." Susie tilts her head and smiles at John. He catches the expression, but looks away before she says, "But we know the owner." "I wish I hadn't dropped the shovel," Jonathan says. "At least then we'd have something to fight with." As soon as the words leave his lips, he regrets them. The shovel appears just over the border of the cemetery, and it undulates through the air as it drifts past where he and Sam stand. Then, an unseen hand forms, grasping it. The rest of the body materializes with silver sparks flying off the figure. The man appears to be Clay Parker, the groundskeeper from the resort and some golf course expansion that's been in the works for a while. This version of him whistles, but the sound wavers like he's whistling into a tin can. Clay Parker's form breaks apart in silvery light, and then the shovel follows in a flash. Laughter like chimes on the wind bounces around the trunks of the trees in an unnatural way. "Maybe we wait here until morning," Jonathan says. "That's great, unless John and Asadi are being dragged down to the water while we're waiting this out. Soon they'll have the whole guild sacrificed to the bay." She takes out her phone and then checks her watch. "My phone and watch are dead." "Want to ask our demon friends for a charge?" "Not out of power," Sam corrects him. "Fried. The screen is actually charred." "This town is bad on electronics," Jonathan says. "And judging by how it felt when those things hit me, they may be like walking electromagnetic pulses." Silvery light forms into a baby in midair. Then the form of Freddie Simpson materializes around it. Mirage Freddy rocks the ghostly baby Blake and moves his lips as if speaking, but the only sound is that of broken glass falling. Sam balls her fists and screams into the night. "Leave my kid out of this!" As Jonathan pulls her back from the edge of the graveyard, the shapes of her business partner and child break apart, and laughter spills through the air. As the pair walks deeper into the graveyard, the unearthly laughter bleeds into a sound like growling and grinding teeth. Maybe we can move through the trees on the other side. Even as he says it, silver sparks can be seen deeper in the forest, revealing hints of the shapes of more bodies. This is happening because there are only 6 of us. Chuck isn't one of us anymore, and we really need to be 7, Sam says. They walk the perimeter of the sacred ground in silence. Both of them stop along the southern arm of the gravestones. Deeper in the trees is another form. It's darker, more solid than the other apparitions so far. They both see it. It stands up straight from leaning on the tree and straightens its uniform. To remove any doubt, it lifts its broad-brimmed hat and fusses with the hatband the way Sheriff Chuck Rollins always did. He wipes his head and looks up into the moonlight, highlighting his face. "You gonna accidentally shoot us in the head too?" Sam mutters. Meeting their gaze finally, Chuck gives them a wink before settling his hat back on his head. After another moment, he tips his hat with an audible flick of one finger, crisp, clear, and real. He turns away and wanders off into the trees without disappearing into silver light like all the other figures had. He was nowhere near the road and seemed to have no clear path as they lost him in the darkness. "Another trick," Jonathan says. "Sure, of course." John Walters and Asadi find Gladys Walters on a well-lit walkway not far from her house, but she isn't alone. "Mason Darrow?" John growls under his breath, much like Sam had done talking to Chuck. It was loud enough that the former interim sheriff turns from looking up at the light to the sound of his own name. "You two having electrical issues too?" "What are you talking about, Darrow?" Darrow eyes John Walters up and down. "Electrical disturbances? Sparks? Brownouts? Anything like that?" "Nothing like that, sir." Asadi casts his eyes down. John considers Asadi's downturned face. Something about the boy's wilted look in the presence of authority, even that of a former sheriff, breaks John's heart a little, but he can't fathom why. Darrow says, "It started out over near the pig in the gas station. It came down this way toward the library for a while. Then people were reporting fuses, breakers, and lights going off all over on the cemetery side of town. Bad power surges. TV and computer screens melting. That's why I keep all my stuff on one of those fancy power strips with a surge protector. They cost a little more, and I swear I have to buy a new one every few months." John turns his attention on Gladys and says, "I need to speak to you about something. Alone." Mason Darrow says, "I need to get going anyway. Be safe, Gladys." "Thank you." John swallows on a bitter taste in the back of his throat. As he saunters away, Gladys watches him leave the lit area for deeper shadows before she approaches John and Asadi. She greets Asadi, and he returns her pleasantries. She looks like she could easily be decades younger than John. "How'd a nice boy like you get mixed up in the foolishness of an old troublemaker like John Walters?" she asks. Asadi finds himself flashing back to the beginning of this nightmare, the night his wife died. John saves him by answering himself. "Wouldn't be here at this hour if it wasn't urgent." "Did you mean you want to talk alone, she asks, "or just no one is good enough to replace Chuck Rollins even for a little while alone?" John's jaw muscles work before he takes a deep breath and shakes his head. "I need some help," he says. "We need supplies from your store right now. I know it's late, but there's something dangerous going on," and Gladys holds up a hand. "I'll let you have whatever you need, John. Just don't involve me in it by telling me anything about the craziness you got going on, okay?" John's shoulders rise with tension, and Asadi braces himself to be the third wheel in an awkward argument about unresolved issues. He notes they are both wearing matching wedding bands. John's shoulders drop and his voice sounds small. Okay, but we need to go now. Please, Gladys. Asadi feels an odd urge to put his arm around John. Gladys takes a set of keys from her pocket and jingles them. The noise makes Asadi shiver. She walks past them without a word, and the men follow. Why are you calling Darrow about power issues? He's not the sheriff or the power company. Gladys snorts and shakes her head. Don't want my house to burn down around me while I'm sleeping. You want my house to burn down around me while I'm sleeping? Don't say things like that. John's voice is small again. You could have called me if you were worried. You're usually busy at night with business I want no part of. John doesn't answer, and Asadi chews at the inside of his mouth. How are you enjoying life in Stillwater Bay, Mr. Asadi? Asadi looks over at John, who just shrugs. He doesn't know what that gesture means in this context. I'm still finding my place, ma'am. Good luck with that. After a prolonged silence, they reach the shop, and she unlocks. John slips through the door and starts searching the shelves before Gladys even has a chance to turn on the lights. She rolls her eyes, but then winks at Asadi. Welcome. Thank you for helping us, Mrs. Walters. You're sweet. I hope you're a good influence on John and not the other way around. Asadi smiles back, but the corner of his mouth twitches. He takes up a black plastic shopping basket from the stack by the door and follows after John into the aisles. Gladys brings up the lights for them, one row at a time, from the bank of switches behind the counter and register. If I get a midnight rush because I opened up for you, I'll never forgive you two. Thank you again, Asadi calls from the aisle where John is scanning rolls of fishing line. We need strong and clear, I'm assuming, John said. Don't want to take any chances. God help us if we're wrong about what kind of invisible shapeshifter we're dealing with a second time tonight. Asadi glances over his shoulder to check Gladys's position and then speaks low. What sacred item was the monster talking about? John stiffens. What are you going on about, Asadi? Itchy sweat prickles around Asadi's neck. When one of the creatures had you, before we escaped, I heard it say you were going to give it the sacred item, or you'd give it your heart. I thought you were going to tell Liang and Susie about it, but you didn't. Don't believe any shit that comes out of a demon's mouth, kid. John drops 2 spools of line into the basket. This will have to do. Any higher test and it's not really clear anymore. More like steel cable. Let's get all the shiny lures we can find. Here is yet something else the Guild isn't going to be honest with him about. At least not yet. Asadi reads the label on the 2 large spools of fishing line as they walk around to a shelf closer to the register. Phantom Premium Clear Pro, 330 pounds test. He has no idea how good that is or not. You taking up deep-sea fishing, John? Gladys asks from leaning on the counter. Thought you avoided the water. Only fishing gear you have is an old tackle box that got left at your place by Chuck, right? Thought you didn't want to know, John said, scanning the lures with his jaw flexed. Might speed things up if you tell me what type of lure you need. Asadi waits for John to speak. When he doesn't, Asadi says, We need reflective, all metal, no feathers or anything. Gladys points. Other end of the shelf. These are all shaped like fish, John grumbles. We need all reflective metal. Gladys sighs. Try the spoons down at the bottom there. I'm looking at the bottom. I'm not seeing them. If it was a snake, it'd bite you, John. I can read the package from here, and my eyes are almost as bad as yours. 100 pack, customizable stainless steel wobbler lures, like the kind people get engraved for wedding gifts or office Christmas presents. Right there. John holds up his hands in frustration, but Asadi picks up the package. These? I think these are perfect. John takes the package from Asadi and throws it into the basket with the fishing line. He starts grabbing up more. People give these as wedding gifts? Asadi blinks and shakes his head. Gladys laughs. I guess you ain't from around here, as the saying goes, huh? I'm from lots of places, I suppose, Mrs. Walters. John takes the basket from Asadi as he finishes filling it. Fishing without a license is a crime, John. You going outlaw trolling tonight? You going to turn me in? She sounds more amused than angry as she says, How would I do that, exactly? Call your old buddy Chuck fresh back from a months-long bender? He'd probably take you fishing if I did. Thick as thieves, those two are, Asadi. This will do, John says, more to himself than anyone else in the room. Now, we just have to find them all before it's too late. How? Asadi asks. That's the difference between successful fishermen and a couple drunks sitting in a boat, Gladys says. You gotta know where to find them and how to lead them before you ever get to playing and landing your catch. We're not really fishing with this stuff, Gladys. You're a stubborn old man, but you're still an old man who's read a book, so you should get the metaphor, she says. The moment you popped up the night of a rolling power surge leading toward the library, I knew this was about you and whatever you're up to tonight. Mason Darrow told you everything you needed to know, and you missed it because you're you. John sets the basket on the counter. I'm starting to see why we didn't last. I doubt it, she says. Bless your heart. Go on, Mrs. Walters. She smiles at Asadi. The rolling surge burns toward the library, then cuts back to the houses near the boneyard, and finally parks there until TV screens melt. Where does that fishing line lead you, Sherlock and Dr. Watson? There is more than one cemetery in Stillwater Bay. Asadi isn't sure she knows about the private one where the guild buries loved ones, but either way, he realizes she has given them the answer they need. John's face softens, and he looks down. Thank you. Just these items, please. Asadi steps away, and a rack of knives near the register catches his attention. On the house, she says to John. Do what you need to do, but come back from it alive, okay? Gladys, you don't have time to argue, John. Take your gear and go. Godspeed. Asadi picks up a thick-bladed knife with a textured grip. It doesn't look like it has anything to do with fishing. May I add this? Sure, but that you'll need to pay for. As they finish up and leave, Gladys turns off the lights. John pauses at the door and speaks without turning. I've never stopped loving you. I know, John. Love was never our problem. How do they know? Tears sting Jonathan's eyes as the image of a young woman reaches out her arms longingly for him at the edge of the graveyard. She's beautiful, until dark wounds open up around her silvery flesh and bleed shadows, as if she were stabbed by invisible knives. She looks as though she is screaming for Jonathan's help now, but only the light jingle of bells can be heard. Who is she? Sam asks quietly. No one. Jonathan looks away from the false image. The clamor of pots and pans rise from the distance. The girl's silvery face contorts into something demonic or vampiric. Her eyes widen into hollow darkness, and her face elongates into the inhuman. Other horrid faces shimmer into existence in the trees around the perimeter of the graveyard, and they all turn toward the noise. Electric disturbances twist and flash as the incomplete shapes of the figures race from the graveyard toward the noise. Is this another trick? Sam asks. I don't know. The banging stops, and they hear voices. That's John, I think, Jonathan says. Or they want us to think it's him. And that sounds like Asadi. Sam shakes her head. They know what we want to see and hear. I'm not sure about that, Jonathan says. They know what to show us to hurt us, but none of it was anything we wanted to see. And it was visual. Haven't heard any of them make good imitations of voices. I heard one of them threaten John over the artifact, Sam says, before we were running through the woods. I'd just gotten bounced off a tree. I don't know. Sam stares out from the graveyard for a couple beats. Let's go see then. If trouble starts, we'll make a break back to here like we did before. They walk out to the edge, and both hesitate. Then they step over and keep going. The farther they get from safety, the dumber Jonathan feels for getting lured this far out. That is, until he sees John and Asadi. They appear solid and real, the way Chuck Rollins had appeared. More than a dozen silvery figures stand pressed against a net of what looks like fishing line strung between trees with metal charms hanging from it. Here goes nothing, John says, as the demons seem to ignore him. He unrolls the spool of fishing line around the backs of the monsters who are mesmerized by the net. The line is too thin to even see in the dark, but the monsters wail and titter like they are trapped. John pulls the line tighter and tighter behind them. One by one, the creatures appear to burst into silvery light that fades out of existence. The silence hangs in the air after they seem to all be gone. John holds the line a moment longer and then drops it. That almost seems anticlimactic, Sam says. You should have been here when they were flying at us just now, Asadi says, or when John had to ask his ex to open the bait shop for us in the middle of the night. Jonathan and Sam chuckle. Jonathan says, I think it's fair to say we've all had a rough night. John shakes his head. Classic case of confusing Maziqims for Palongs. Happens to the best of us. Asadi can't tell if he's being sarcastic or not. I need to check on my kid and go to bed, Sam says. Everyone should get some rest. John pats Asadi's shoulder. We can't be up all day and night like Lee and Jonathan try to. Asadi uses his new knife to cut down their fishing line web from the trees. As Asadi moves through the bungalows, he is still thinking of his wife in the water in her last moments, until he sees a figure at his door. It just couldn't have been that easy to be done with the horrors tonight. He draws his new knife as he approaches, picturing the monster that oozed into his home and destroyed his world, a monster that may still lurk out here. Asadi? Uncle? Asadi hides the knife behind his back. What are you doing here? His uncle, Lafayette Farman, leaves the front of the house and approaches Asadi. The university is on a few days' break. I haven't heard from you since, well, I was worried. Asadi releases the knife and lets it drop behind him. The point stabs into the grass as Asadi hugs his uncle. I'm so sorry about what happened with Takia. She was like a daughter to me, and you like my own son. As his uncle talks of Asadi being like a son during their embrace, Asadi pictures John Walters and the difficult night they had together. He doesn't understand why. As they release, Asadi says, It's been... He can't finish. I know. Are you still on leave from teaching? Asadi swallows and nods in response. Are you going back? Asadi hesitates to answer, and that serves as answer enough. I don't know. It's been years since she got sick. She would want you to go on living. Years? Asadi's mouth hangs open. She just died. He just called his uncle about it, and she didn't die from being sick. What does he mean, years? He wonders if this is yet another shapeshifter. He calculates whether he can get to the knife in time. A fine evening to you both, gentlemen, a passerby says. And to you, my kind brother, Uncle Lafayette says back. His uncle is the only person he knows who greets people that way. That would be a hard detail for a shapeshifter to guess. Asadi turns his attention on the speaker. It's Old Man Willis, the guy who borrowed a VCR from the library the night his wife died. That guy creeps Asadi out worse than the monsters for some reason. Years? Years, his uncle had said. That wasn't right at all. Asadi feels hollow as he wonders if it's this town doing it. Does Stillwater Bay protect itself by clouding the minds of those who might question this evil? How long before Asadi starts to forget? He thinks about another monster who recently offered to help him forget, and he shivers. How long are you staying, Uncle? Only a couple days, I'm afraid. I was going to get a room at the resort, but wanted to talk to you first. No! His uncle looks shocked, and Asadi tries to modulate his voice as he walks his uncle back to his car. No, I mean, there are better rooms for a better rate out in Peach Blossom. We should go there now. I'll go with you. Asadi doesn't know what Lee has left to tell him about the resort, but he knows it isn't good. Okay, fine. Do you want to pack first, Asadi? No, it's late. I just want to get there and rest. Asadi remembers something. Get the car started. I'll be there in a moment. He returns to where he dropped the knife and freezes in place. The scar in the dirt is there, but the knife is gone. Asadi braces himself. He remembers having his belly opened up by the blade of an attacker as if it is happening now. Under the dark windows of the bungalow, he remembers the thing feeding on his wife and unborn child. He waits for the next creature or killer to lunge from the shadows to slaughter him with his own knife. Tonight, it doesn't come. He gets his uncle out of Stillwater Bay safely, and 2 days later, back to Alabama alive. Asadi counts that as his greatest victory of the week, considering all the family he has lost. By the time Asadi's uncle leaves, he acts as if he doesn't remember Takia at all. As another day ends for Asadi, the evening begins for Sheila Tulane. She stands on a wooden dock, waiting. Moonlight sparkles in the water. At her back, the cabins of Jackson's resort stand stark and white. Sheila doesn't look into the water. She doesn't want to see her reflection, even if it is dulled by moonglow. She doesn't want to see the wrinkles which crease the corners of her eyes, nor the fresh dye in her hair. Footsteps force her to turn. A man approaches from the direction of the cabins. He smiles as she rushes forward. Strong arms wrap round her, and a hungry mouth closes over her own. She revels in the kiss of Teague Harmon. I'm glad you decided to come, he says. Me too. Do you mind sneaking out to see me? No, I'd do anything for you. Anything? Yes. He holds her tight, his mouth near her ear. What if I told you to kill someone? Would you do it? Or would you hate me for it? He pulls away, but his gaze still holds. He's testing, judging. She wants him to love her, wants to... I would kill for you. Teague presses his lips to hers. He tears at her blouse, exposing her breasts to the chill air. Say it again, he whispers, reaching beneath her skirt. His belt buckle clinks as he fumbles for it. Denim brushes her skin. She cries out as he enters. The words become a scream. I'll kill for you.
To be continued. Hi, this is Chuck Rollins. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Come back next time for Episode 5, Lost Souls, written by Naching T. Casa.